Today we have Tyler Funky Bones Jones. Tyler is fighting for the Vigilant MMA Combat Jiu Jitsu 170-pound championship down in Florida in November 7th. So Tyler is one of our newer sponsored athletes coming in today from out near Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Out here in Chicago.
Awesome, Tyler. Thanks for joining us. So first I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about combat jiu-jitsu because I think it's something that's pretty new. People that are ingrained in jiu-jitsu and MMA, right, and do it day in and day out probably know what it is. But for the casual fan of MMA or like your fans, for instance, how would you describe the differences between an MMA fight and then combat jiu-jitsu?
So combat jiu-jitsu is almost a hybrid of MMA and jiu-jitsu, right? So it's basically a grappling match, but then once the match hits the floor, so both opponents have their knees down, you're allowed to have open hand strikes. So there's like a lot of misconception that it's only slaps. It's never like explicitly stated. I like to use my palm a lot. So like back in the old days of pancrase and all that stuff, that's what they were using. So that's basically what it is. And I think from a promotion standpoint, the promoter in Florida, it's a super smart move because it allows people, Florida's got a really big jiu-jitsu scene. It allows these guys to kind of inch their way into MMA and kind of test out what the waters kind of feel like, not getting 100% look, but definitely getting, tipping their toes in the water and kind of seeing how it goes. So yeah, it's smart. And I love it. Especially during these weird times with the pandemic, fights aren't always, on the table right now, I guess you'd say. So this is just a good way to stay active and get some competition time in.
Sure. And, you talked about it being like a way to kind of, dip your toes in the water for people that are, jiu-jitsu people thinking about MMA. Now, you've had a couple MMA fights. Have you had competed in combat jiu-jitsu before?
No, so I actually did it backwards. So I have MMA fights, and then I had the combat jiu-jitsu matches after that. So once the pandemic kind of locked everything down, like I was saying, fights started slowing up, fight off was slowing up. But this, the combat jiu-jitsu thing kind of was getting offered to me, and I've done two now, and this will be my third one. But it really does teach you lessons. Like in both of my MMA fights, I'd gotten to dominant positions really early and kind of really unloaded in full mount and side control and just trying to get them out of there. And what these combat jiu-jitsu matches have taught me is just to kind of take the time, pick your shots, and kind of focus on position more than strikes and kind of force them into their next move as opposed to me trying to stop the fight all the time. So definitely lessons to be learned from that too. I think these have really kind of upped my game striking on the ground.
And it's funny you say that because when I've watched it, EBI had some combat jiu-jitsu, and I would watch that, and the competitors would almost use their strikes to set up submissions as opposed to finishing someone with strikes, which I think is a very different way of going about striking on the ground. You watch a lot of these heavy-handed guys that are good ground and pound guys, and they're just finishing people by putting them out. But if you can take someone who is a very good jiu-jitsu fighter and teach them the way to open up submissions by using their strikes, I think it's a whole new world of grappling for those guys when they, usually have to force something or make their opponent make a mistake. Now they can literally beat them to get what they want.
Yeah, 100%. And that if you go back and watch my last combat jiu-jitsu match at Vigilant against Gino Ciprius, that's exactly what happened, right? Gino is a good no-gi jiu-jitsu guy, but hadn't had any MMA fights, and that's how it played out, right? I was striking him a lot early and often until he made the mistake and he wanted to choose a way out and he gave me his neck. And that's the game plan pretty much for all of these, There's no secret in the fact that, I want to take someone down and beat them up until they give me their out, right? And for me, primarily focusing on MMA, that's kind of where I don't want to just go in there and grapple with someone. I still want to get the experience of what I need to be doing in there, right? I still want those rounds, those looks, and kind of feeling how to gauge myself and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a great point. It's really kind of forces you as an athlete, if you're on top, to force them into a corner and make them choose.
And, you talk about your experience and learning different things. How has your just overall experience into getting MMA been, in the sense of, what was your background like? How'd you find a gym? What was that like for you getting into the sport?
So I started watching. My brother introduced MMA to me. The first event I ever watched live was Stephen Bonner versus Forrest Griffin, the Tough One finale. So I was probably like 12 or 11 when that happened, and I was addicted to it right away. I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. But just like in all things in life, it's sometimes hard to get to that path. Wrestled in high school. Didn't take it serious till my senior year. Had a really good coach that just kind of stuck with me and motivated me, and I was able to get a D3 opportunity. So I wrestled in college for a few years, then kind of finished my undergrad at some schools that didn't have a college wrestling program. And in that time, it was right around like when Conor fought Mayweather. I had been just kind of rolling around haphazardly, not really training for anything. And I had torn something in my knee and got infected with staph infection. And I had surgery and I was like off the mats forever. I was off of really doing anything except laying in bed. And I just remember thinking like, man, this is my chance. When I get this cast off, I need to go hard. If this is what I want to do with my life, I need to make an actual movement to do that, So right after that, I had joined a jiu-jitsu gym or an MMA gym, a bigger outfit here in the Midwest, and it just kind of didn't really work out for me. I needed more like one-on-one kind of instruction, and that's where I found Farrow Academy, which is right here. It's black belt Anthony Farrow from Illinois. Veteran. He's a Marine, and his jiu-jitsu is just sick. He's undefeated, amateur, just a great guy, great game, and it just stuck there. I started coaching wrestling there, started training there 5 days a week, and then I had my first fight after about training with them for 3 to 4 months, I think, with no stand-up, which was a terrible idea. So my first fight was against a really good striker, and I was able to get away with the victory with that unanimous decision, but I took some shots in the meantime, so it was a crazy fight. And then after that, having that experience, I decided to take half of my camp to Intercept MMA, where I do all my MMA and striking with Danny Summers. And that's changed my game in ways I can't even explain, even on the ground, just kind of understanding, being in a room full of guys who are just MMA fighters as opposed to just guys who are jiu-jitsu practitioners really makes me switch up how to attack this when I'm going against these people, but how to attack this when I'm going against this other group. But yeah, and that's where I'm at now, 2 fights deep. This will be my 3rd Combat Jiu Jitsu match, and then, probably 40 or 50 of these smaller grappling outfits that come around. I know last year, 2019, I probably had maybe 35 or 40 competitions, whether it be super fights with places like Tap Cancer Out or MMA fights, and I was actually able to go 30-something-0. I didn't lose anything last year, so it was a good year for me last year. But this year it's a little crazy with the opportunity, but trying to get it in still.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where everybody's at right now, which is people just want to compete. Like, you're going down to Florida to compete in combat jiu-jitsu because, especially for amateurs, the fights really aren't opening up. There's not a whole lot of opportunity for people to stay fresh, and it's kind of almost delaying the pipeline, if you want to call it that, because so many people were advancing right at a certain level or getting to a certain level, and now amateur MMA for the past almost year has been on a standstill. So I think there's going to be a gap at some point, right, where now we're kind of starting to see guys that are 2-0, 3-0 fighting in the UFC, because that's the kind of call-ups that they need. So you said you needed to take it seriously. You needed to start really training full speed ahead, and you found an MMA gym. You're teaching wrestling. So what is your goal for now into 2021 and moving forward in terms of how active you want to stay, where you would fight, things of that nature?
So, and you bring up a really good point, right? Like this time is unprecedented, right? We don't really know what's happening, but I think especially for amateurs, it's absolutely key to not stunt our progression right now, right? Like, staying active is the biggest thing, and that's why I'm taking these fights, because a year off, right? Realistically, I may have 8 more years of doing this and competing. But to take a year off right now, right in the middle of my kind of working my way up to pro, it would be devastating to my progression, you know? So doing this and staying active within this realm definitely is going to be on my radar. I know after I win this belt, I need to defend, I think it was at one of their next 3 events in Florida. So definitely I plan on doing that. And then after that's all said and done, I think I'd probably try and hop in an MMA fight to wherever's open. I have 3 teammates that are fighting on a card in Kentucky right before the Friday before I fight. So, you know, obviously we're going to support them, and that's probably where I will fight too, I would imagine. But yeah, really just kind of taking in whatever opportunity comes. I mean, by 2021, I would like to have, you know, a few more MMA fights under my belt, because I'd like to go pro before I'm 28 and I'm 26 right now. So, you know, just keep getting lessons and who knows how the progression goes, but I do want to put myself within striking distance of becoming a pro and starting to get those bigger opportunities, you know, within the next 2 years.
And you made an interesting statement there of you want to go pro by the time you're 28, where when I talk to a lot of amateur fighters who are, you know, making that decision of, is that something that I want to do? Is this something that I'm very serious about?
Yeah.
They almost talk in more of a sense of, I want to get X amount of fights. So is there a fight number that you have in mind, or is it more of like you want to progress to where you feel comfortable and say you can put that pro stamp on your name and you hope that's by 28?
Yeah, that's more what I'm in line with, because, you know, for me, I've been grappling now for 10 plus years, right? I'm 26 years old. I probably started wrestling when I was 13 or 14. And it shows now. Like, I feel like I have a mastery of grappling. And striking is really the only thing that I need to kind of really work on and really get that foundation built correctly. And I feel comfortable with another like 1.5 to 2 years in that. I mean, as a wrestler and as a jiu-jitsu competitor, competition is something that feels normal to me. Like, competition is, I could eat. Sorry, there's a kitten over here. It's freaking out. The competition for me is that's where I live, right? I eat that pressure. I love that pressure, and it's just been drilled in my head from the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grappling competitions I've had. And so the competition itself isn't, you know, isn't too much of a worry for me. It's more of just hitting those milestones and making sure that I am where I need to be to feel comfortable being pro. I feel even right now I could probably grapple and do pretty well against some of the pro fighters in the area. It's just a matter of making sure my stand-up's on par.
Yeah, we saw, you know, a classic, what most people thought was like a striker versus grappler matchup last night, right? But then you also do have Justin Gaethje's just wrestling background, right? He was an NCAA All-American. You watch his early fights, and he's picking people up and slamming them on their heads, right? That's where his violence came from. Now, he's leg kicking people, but then he's also, you know, outclassing people grappling. And we saw, you know, Khabib really close the distance in that second round and take who you think is, you know, a pretty good grappler in Justin Gaethje's back. And from there, it was kind of game over. And Khabib showed off some jiu-jitsu that I don't think people really gave him credit for, because he never really used it before. And he was setting up that triangle position from the top at the end of the first round. And, you know, it kind of is short-sighted to think that the best fighter arguably on the planet doesn't work on his back game, right? Doesn't work on his jiu-jitsu. And, you know, that being said, is there, something that you work on, you know, specifically for the cage in jiu-jitsu that maybe you wouldn't work on for competition jiu-jitsu? Like, are there things that you're doing that are cage oriented as opposed to if you're just going in, getting in the gi and then just rolling?
Yeah, 100%. Man, our Saturday practices at Intercept, they're a 2-hour grind practice. It's meant for the people who are going to be competing and fighting. And man, we probably spend at least an hour 20 minutes of that working on cage stuff, because it's such a big deal, especially in amateur, right, where you throw a jab and your back's against the fence if you're on the other side of that jab. So yeah, we work a ton of takedown offense off of that cage. We work a ton of takedown defense off of that cage. I mean, we're just constantly on the wall around the cage in our gym. Um, I mean, kind of getting at the question at hand, like, yeah, I think for me, especially going up against someone who doesn't have MMA experience and is mostly a gi grappler, the cage is a huge weapon for me, whether it be on bottom or top or kind of baiting someone in. I like to work a lot of scrambles when my back's against the cage and kind of just garner them into grabbing a leg and then going out on my own kind of ventures. But yeah, I think the cage is huge, you know, and I think what we were talking about with Habib yesterday and just kind of the awareness of saying, hey, I got a short time in this round. Let me see how he defends this armbar and see where we go. You know, because if I lose the position, then nothing really matters anyways. There's 2 seconds left. And yeah, I think it paid dividends when he sets it up in the next round and finishes them with it. But yeah, the cage I think is maybe one of the most underutilized weapons outside of the UFC. You know.
Yeah, and for people who have never done it, can you explain just how grueling it is to wrestle with your back on the cage or even with someone on the cage? Because when people watch the UFC and there's a lot of cage work, they don't necessarily understand the intricacies that are going on while that's happening and how just totally exhausting that is for people.
So really, I mean, both sides of that battle are probably, you know, it's always a 50-50 battle in that position because you know, the person who is pushing the person into the fence has constantly got to check and make sure that their head's above the other person's head and to make sure that they're not able to eke out one of the sides. And that's exhausting in and of itself. And then the person up against the fence, it almost feels like there's a car parked on top of you and your back is, you know, you have a bare back. A lot of people don't think about the fact that when you're fighting, you know, you're not wearing a shirt. So when you're dragging up against that fence, your skin's getting ripped up. You got welts on your back. I mean, it's not fun by any means. And that's why we see these guys really kind of work really hard to get out, because if you give the person in front of you a chance to settle in that position and start really pouring it on you, it's going to be hard to get out. You know, it's going to be one of those explosion things where you really have to kind of pick your window and go, as opposed to just kind of, you know, it's not like being in mount where we get to like work slowly on each little window and slowly get back to our recovery of guard. I mean, when you're against the fence, you got to go because you're going to get smothered, you know? And then for the takedown stuff, I mean, it's almost in my kind of mind, it's like driving a car, but you don't have a brake pedal. You only have your emergency brake. That's the only thing. When someone's in on a takedown for you, you can only do big movements to get out. It's last resort against the fence. You really have to work so hard. Whereas in the middle of the fence, you know, there's a middle of the cage rather, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. You know, you can scramble, sprawl, whatever, but that fence stops you from doing so much. So working takedown defense on the fence is probably one of the most grueling things MMA has to offer, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same. Just like your MMA classes, you know, ours were always structured that there was a lot of cage work. And one, it's because you need it. Like you said, in amateurs, it is always either against the cage or on the ground. Right? It's very rare that in an amateur fight, neither of those things happen. And then two, it just makes you get in better shape, right? You have to be in better shape if you're doing cage work constantly. And that being said, you know, in this combat jiu-jitsu fight down in Florida, is it in a cage? Is it in a ring? Is it open mat?
Yeah, so it's in a cage, but they have a few different types of cages. So I don't know which one it will be. And they have a circular cage, which I was in the last 2 times, but I've also seen them go forward with like a square cage, which is interesting to me. I even think it could be worse for the person against the fence, because if you get put in a corner, it's going to be really tough to get up. So, but I think there will be a cage regardless, because there's MMA fights within the night too. It's like a giant card. They have like a matinee event from like noon to 6, and then the main card is from 6 to 10 or something like that.
Oh,
so
wow.
There's a lot of fights. So I would imagine, I would think they'd go with the circle one as opposed to the square one, because in MMA it's got to be kind of strange to fight in a square. But yeah, so there'll be a fence.
Awesome. And then, you know, last thing here before I let you go, when are you leaving? How are you getting down there? You know, what's your plan for travel for down to Florida?
Yeah, so I've tried it different every single time now I've gone to Florida. So this is the third time I went. The first time I went, um, I took a buddy out with me last minute, and we showed up on fight day, and I had to weigh in on fight day, which was terrible. I'll never do that again. And then the second time, I went out by myself, and I went out on a Friday, which was nice because I got to go roll actually with Robbie Donafario down in Tampa. Is a great leg lock guy, so I got to spend some time with him and his school, and that was a great experience. But this time, I'm kind of turning it into more of a vacation, so I'll be going out there Thursday with my girlfriend. We have Airbnb, and just kind of get down there close to, if not on weight, and just kind of relax and take the weather in and take the opportunity in and just kind of enjoy it, you know. I always remember like driving by the airport on my way to work thinking like, man, wouldn't it be cool to travel out somewhere knowing that you're going out there to fight? Like that's the reason you're going out there. And I get to do that now. So it's an awesome experience. Every time I do it, it's so cool to me. And you know, it's good practice too, because, you know, turning pro definitely opens the doors to going to all over the world. You never know, you know, especially where how the UFC is operating these days. You could get a call to go to Yaz Island in a week's time. You know, you just never know. So being able to just be comfortable hopping on a plane to go compete is definitely a skill that I want to make sure I know well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't really beat jumping out of, you know, Chicago's weather in November and
Right.
heading down to Tampa.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I'm excited about that. We're already starting. I think we're supposed to get snow this week, actually. So that'll be fun.
Good, good. Well, you know, hopefully you have good weather when you get down there. You know, everything goes good with your travel. We're looking forward to it. You know, one thing before we go, anything you know, shout outs want to say, any kind of thanking training partners, anything like that, floor is yours.
For sure. So, you know, big thank you to everyone at both Faro Academy and Intercept MMA for letting me slap you guys in preparation for this. I know that's never fun. Also, big thank you to all my sponsors. I've had a huge outpouring of sponsors before we signed with you guys. We had some other T-shirts made, and those did really well, and sponsors were able to kind of get their name out on all those T-shirts. So big thank you to you know, sponsors like Skeptic Distillery and Fumo's Fight Organization. You know, and that should be a mention as well. A huge shout out to my former high school wrestling coach, Mike Fumagalli. His wife passed away from colon cancer a few years back, and he started a foundation to kind of you know, help widowed families and stuff like that. So yeah, big shout out to him. He was immenseful in his help, kind of getting everything together. And yeah, I can't wait to get out there and fight. Put on a show. The pay-per-view will be on Fight TV, so keep an eye out on my social media for the links and all that stuff. And like I said, again, thank you to all my coaches, my sponsors, you guys at MMA Tees. Experience has been great thus far, and go pick up some of my shirts.
Awesome, Tyler. Appreciate your time today. Good luck down there in Florida in November. We'll look forward to it.
Thanks, sir.
All right, thanks.